A New True View of Education, a synopsis of key ideas, by Mama V. Promise, an independent media and publications professional. Please note that the current version contains PowerPoint timing errors that leave too much time between slides. Until we correct this problem, please be patient and use the time to contemplate what you've heard in the previous slide. Thank you. What would it take for America's educational system to work? Is the system making us healthier, wiser, or happier? Is the $600+ billion we spend on education every year bearing the fruit we're expecting? Could there be a better way? First, let's think about what learning is and about what education is. A philosophy of education considers abstract questions using the tools of formal logic, such as, what is the nature of the mind? What is the nature of learning? How does education relate to the rest of life? Educational theory, on the other hand, considers questions answered by experimental evidence, such as, what should we learn? When should we learn? Where should we learn? How much should we learn? Who should be educated? Who decides what and when and where and how we learn? And then by the flip side of the coin, why does learning sometimes fail? About the mind. We'll first look at the mind from several perspectives: the functional perspective, the social perspective, the developmental perspective, and even the metaphysical perspective. The functional perspective. That is to say, what does the mind actually do? Scientific and experiential evidence suggests that the mind is always learning, always teaching simply by being who we are, and always choosing. It never stays still. When not addressing itself to something in particular, it's in default mode network, a stream of self-propagation. Mind has no known limits on learning. It has recently been discovered, or confirmed, to be incredibly plastic. The social perspective. The individual mind seeks connection with other minds. It likes to cooperate and to compete. For better and for worse, it is capable of uncharacteristic and/or extreme behaviors in the company of others, compared to its inclinations in solitude. The developmental perspective. The individual mind branches as it develops, like a tree. It is said to be more than 99% sub or unconscious, because growth progresses outwardly, away from the source. It develops in phases, as when ice becomes water and water becomes steam, featuring new constructs at each node. It enjoys different developmental challenges at each level, and thus appreciates level-appropriate approaches to learning. From the metaphysical perspective, I'm kind of going out on a limb here, but I feel I need to include this just for frame of reference to be complete. Mind appears to project matter, including the brain in which it's localized, rather than the other way around. The mind authors its own experience. As an observer, it occasionally experiences phenomena that could be called supernatural. As an agent or doer, it has shown itself to be capable of transcending its programming, both temporarily and permanently. What is learning? The what of learning? One psychology textbook definition says that learning is a relatively permanent change in behavior or the capacity for behavior due to experience. This is a very crude definition, as learning starts at the molecular level. Our body's molecules change in response to the environment all the time, and vice versa. Each organism changes the environment all the time. The how of learning. The more we learn, the more we can learn. A neuron, as it learns, makes new connections with other neurons. Earlier learning creates a molecular template or imprint for later experience. It can even change our DNA. Neural pathways are strengthened by use and dissolved by neglect. The why of learning. The goal of all learning is to be a self. Carl Rogers said, "A person learns significantly only those things that are perceived as being involved in the maintenance of or enhancement of the structure of self." In other words, learning, or the unwillingness to learn, is intimately bound up with our sense of self. Changes in educational theory often reflect changes in our collective sense of self. The role of trauma in learning. Why are we even talking about this here? Trauma frequently contributes to either or both the willingness and or unwillingness to learn. It is often responsible for that famous fine line between genius and insanity, which I maintain is one of usefulness. It reroutes neural traffic and reconfigures learning circuitry. Healing from trauma frees our neural circuitry to learn afresh. Any meaningful approach to education must factor in the role of trauma. Simple principles of learning. Doing what works. This is a simple survey of principles related to different facets of the learning experience. Attitude, setting, navigation, training modalities, perception, process and dynamics. Simple principles of learning. Attitude. We'll start with some principles of attitude, or the state of mind with which we approach the learning situation. Attitudes that work include relentless curiosity and the faith that it will take us someplace worthwhile. Gratitude for the inquiring minds over the ages who have made this moment possible. Gratitude for the world about which we are learning and for the learning experience itself. The awareness of teaching as the optimal modality for solidifying learning. The acceptance of one's apparent abilities and limitations and those of others, because only by accepting where we are can we move forward from there. Simple principles of learning. Setting. These are principles describing the optimal collaborative learning space. It should have a balance of comfort and structure. It should be handy to food, hygiene, and recreational amenities. It should provide assigned workspace for each student to be used for homework and extracurricular projects besides school activities. It should be accessible yet protected. It should be systematic without being suppressive, organic without being random. It should be family-friendly and multi-generational. It should be integrated with other community activity and the rest of life. Simple principles of learning. Navigation. These are principles relating to how we find our way around the edusphere. The educational system or service should be self and or family directed depending on the age of the student, and self and or family paced. with clear recommendations from the school or online service as to the most effective ways to work through the material. A frame of reference, a "you are here" orientation helps us assimilate new material. Systematization, such as academia provides, can help us organize our thinking and strategize our learning career. A good system is responsive to students' rapidly shifting interests while maintaining coherence and balance over the long haul. Simple principles of learning, training modalities. These are high-level categorizations for the very different ways in which the mind-brain learns. Formal education falls into three basic domains. Procedural learning includes skills training, for instance in math, logic, problem solving, core sciences, engineering, music and the arts, and natural and computer languages. Performance in these areas is quantitatively measurable, corresponding to hard skills development. Declarative learning covers information about, in the derivative sciences, technology, history, geography, politics, the arts, sports, celebrities of the day, business and finance, the weather, what people are talking about, whatever it takes to be well informed. In specialized subject areas, it consists of the industry's conversation. Performance in these areas can be graded for showing up and formally recognized for useful contributions. Citizenship, for want of a better word, we could just as well say human-heartedness, encompasses all manner of personal development, mind training, social and emotional maturation, in a Carl Rogers-style agendaless human-to-human forum. Performance in this modality would be ungraded, but the staff makes sure participants stay engaged. It's important to include enough of each modality and to clarify goals and intentions with respect to each. Simple principles of learning. Perception. These are principles related to the perceptual considerations of learning. Scaffolding means using existing knowledge as a structure for the building of new knowledge. Active sensory modalities work better than passive modalities. The more modalities involved in a learning experience, the better. Everyone has their own style of learning which needs to be respected, which means both accommodated and expanded upon for best results. Learning works best when material can be repeated, refreshed, and reviewed as often as desired. Regular informal testing has been shown to be very beneficial to learning retention. Simple principles of learning, process and dynamics. These are principles related to the process considered as a supersystem, a flow of information. Creativity or genius can be cultivated or it can be suppressed, but it can never be destroyed. Teaching and learning work best when we can both analyze and reintegrate. The most satisfying teaching and learning experiences feature a sense of unity and synergy amongst teacher and students, a loss of sense of role distinction between them. Stuck places or snurgles in learning call for patient loving attention until they're resolved. Existing resources should be mindfully merged with newer modalities. What is education? We can say that it's goal-directed learning that purposefully systematizes our inherent learning capabilities toward a perceived good. It occurs both formally and informally, both solo and collaboratively. When done collaboratively, it presupposes shared goals and priorities. At the institutional level, it represents what a culture would like to believe about itself and the world. However, It also sets up its own frame of reference, which can sometimes be self-serving. Why school? Does schooling make learning better? Learning happens organically. Education happens spontaneously. So what's so great about school? Things have come to be as they are through a mix of motivations. Why educate? Looking at it from a global perspective, the ideal or concept of education occupies a different position in different cultures. Universal education is a relatively new idea, new enough that the idea that a luxury should need to be compulsory still comes as a shock to those in developing areas who have just begun to enjoy its availability. Why educate? Perceived benefits to individuals. Individuals have valued education as a means toward the goals of improvement of thinking processes, better understanding of the world, pursuit of truth at various levels, material gain, social prestige, and skills development. Why educate? Perceived benefits to communities. Communities have valued education as a means toward the goals of development of useful skills amongst the population, economic self-determination, preparation for known and unknown future circumstances, distinction amongst their fellows. How are we doing? Critique of the prevailing model. The good stuff. Everybody gets to go to school, usually for free. Everybody learns more or less the same material, so we end up with a relatively level playing field. We get exposed to amazing, exciting ideas. We develop at least a vague awareness of our place in geography and history. We connect with a wide array of other humans. Most of us at least learn to read. Critique of the prevailing model, the not-so-good stuff. With respect to the process, the educational system answers to mixed agendas. It generates conflict and anxiety. It takes a lot of the joy out of learning. It fragments knowledge. It fails to encourage integration and thus usefulness. It applies scientific principles in scattershot fashion. It sets arbitrary boundaries on learning conditions, stifling freedom of inquiry. It drags its feet in adapting to changing circumstances. Critique of the prevailing model, the not-so-good stuff. With respect to the results, in general, people retain very little of what they learn, so most can't even help their kids with simple math homework. Most are not prepared for work upon high school graduation. We have not been educated to keep up with changes in the workplace, and so our skills become obsolete quickly. We don't develop science skills adequate to address today's complex issues. We do not develop the agility and thinking needed in today's world. Now let's look at education as it could be. In school, topics could be taught modularly and in a self-paced fashion, so that each student would spend exactly as long as they needed on each module. Students would go to school to elaborate and collaborate on what they had learned on their own. Sal Khan calls this the flipped classroom. Students would be 100% responsible for learning outcomes that they had agreed to. Teachers would be mentors, coaches, and entertainers. Schools would be multi-generational. Schools would be housed in multi-purpose community facilities and vice versa. Parental function would be assigned to individuals, not institutions. Record keeping would be globally centralized, so that transfers would be seamless. Beyond school, you could subscribe to email updates in desired fields from a globalized online textbook databank, for instance, as described in my Global Education Initiative presentation. A help button on any technological device could link to centralized educational resources, drilling down from its own onboard help system to the relevant topic in a global database. Your toaster could teach you about thermal conduction. Your blender could teach you the chemistry of food combination. Amusement park rides could teach you kinematics. Doctors could show you videos illustrating your medical problems. Auto mechanics could show you videos illustrating your mechanical problems. At the onset of a natural disaster, the global problem-solving community could convene online with tools at their collective fingertips to crowdsource our way to a speedy solution. PBS could offer a complete science curriculum on TV. Geek could become the new chic. Education could be a positive, participatory, lifelong process. At the end of the rainbow, we get a world that has learned to cooperate, full of students who are excited to learn and know how to direct their own learning and facilitate that of others. When it works well, we feel truer personally and more connected socially, more at one with the universe. Wait, there's more. Please see also Mama V's other presentations, introducing the Global Education Initiative and Mama's Math Movement, also found on youtube.com and mamavpromise.com. Thanks for watching. Produced by Mama V Promise Productions. Ideas, design, text, layout, and narration by Mama V Promise in 2016.